Hello, I'm Lorelei Drock. I'm a four-time near-death experiencer and multi-spiritually transformative experiencer. My first near-death experience was when I was 7 years old. That day, my aunt and uncle came to visit. They lived next door. And they came over and we were sitting in the kitchen. And my brother, he's 6 years older than me, asked to go down to our quarry. We lived on 191 acres in rural Wisconsin. That used to be a quarry, so they had struck natural springs. So we had about five or six. But this was the largest one that we wanted to go to that day. It had two entrances. The first one was a drive that had flooded over, connecting the two ponds. And because it was shallow, the bluegills liked to spawn there. My brother wanted to go see the fish and possibly go fishing. And my mother was cooking supper, so she was like, "Take your little sister with you." Didn't want me underfoot. So my aunt and uncle decided to walk us down to these ponds. And then they went to the bluegill, the less deep. It was only maybe like a foot deep area where they like to spawn on this flooded drive. Well, my aunt took me down to the furthest entrance, which was the 30-foot deep main part of the quarry. My family had built this pier out of like wood and posts. It went on out maybe like 6 foot to the deepest part in the middle. You had to go down like this sharp embankment to walk out there. And it was kind of mid-late afternoon as the sun's kind of down in the sky facing you. And it was really bright, especially reflecting off the water, I recall. Well, I made my little 7-year-old self way down there to the end of the pier. My aunt stayed on shore. Water made her uneasy. She couldn't swim. Neither could I, is of note. So I was just looking off on the left side of the pier, and the sun was kind of rippling off the water, and I started to feel really lulled, like I was being sucked into it. So I moved to the other side, not facing the sun, but I still felt that same pull to the water. My aunt then asked me, she's like, "Are you going to be safe? Will you be okay for a few minutes? I want to go check on your uncle." She always got nervous if she was a little too far away from him. And being 7-year-old confident me, "Oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm just standing here." And so then the last thing I remember is her walking away, going down the path. The path was surrounded by all the stick trees, so it's not like she could see me once she left the area. I was sitting there watching just a little bit more. And then I have no memory, but somehow next I knew I was in the water, feet first, sinking off that right side of the pier. And I remember seeing the bubbles come up in front of my face. And my thought was, "Oh, wow, I can't breathe in. I can't swim. I'm going to drown. I'm going to die." And as soon as I said within my thought system, "I'm going to die," I was above my body. My consciousness was no longer within my being. And I was watching it sink with my hands straight up in the air and the bubbles coming up and my hair floating through the water. And then I rose. It felt like 10, 20 feet above the scene. And I was looking down. And the next thing, my consciousness was connecting to everybody that was beneath me. I remember first connecting with my brother, and he was like thinking, "Can I swim there faster or run to her to save her?" And I remember in spirit thinking that was so funny. Like, neither one. You're not going to get to me fast enough. You're not a fast enough swimmer. And running that distance as well, no, because the entrances were fairly far apart. And then my uncle, hearing my aunt scream because she must have heard me fall in. He was thinking the responsibility aspects, like they're going to blame us. Oh my God, we're supposed to be watching her. How did she fall in? My aunt was turning around, coming towards me, towards the water, trying to make her way down without falling and getting to the end of the pier. Her thoughts were similar of, oh my gosh, this is my fault. And how am I going to save her? I can't swim, but I'm the closest. How can I get to her? So she was determining she could hang on to the end post and try to reach me and just kind of pull me in by my hair. As I rose a little farther and the scene expanded, I could see my mother back at home making supper. She was chopping up vegetables. I think it was for chili, I believe. She was wondering, when will they be home? Did they catch anything? Did they decide to fish? As soon as I connected with my mom, all of a sudden, my next memory is being within this whiteness. And there was like a mist to it, almost like clouds. And I could tell there was like a being to my left, but it's not like I could see any bodies. I just sensed the energy present, like it had guided me to this place. And I remember looking up, or just consciously being aware of this tremendous light. It was the brightest white you think would burn your eyes if it were physically present as light. And so I almost didn't want to look at it, but I opened my eyes fully, and I was seeing this beautiful white light. And as it expanded, it was this bright neon yellow to this amber to this orange. It was massive in my vision. I could tell it was above me, like a stairway or something. And there was this arch or portal behind it. I just knew there was like some place beyond this being of light. And I could see the outline of its shape, but the light was so massive, it was hard to see. And there was just this overwhelming peace and love that is beyond like a motherly love, maternal, like you were its baby. And it's not describable in words, the way this light and warmth and peace flooded you. And as I felt this being draw closer, I remember like this telepathic understanding of you have more to do. And I remember, for what felt like lifetimes, literally arguing with this being. No, I'm not returning. I knew it had showed me things. And I'm like, I'm not going back to that. There's no way you can make me go through that. I can't do this. And that went on for, like I said, what felt like eternity, of this back and forth, telepathically. And then I heard this loudest, booming, authoritative voice, male voice, go, "You must go back. You have more to do." And I felt like this little child going, okay. Like, okay, I know. And the next thing, I was back above my body. My aunt had managed to drag me in. And by the time she had done so, my uncle had got there and helped her carry me to the shore. They had laid my body up on the embankment in the grass next to all the gravel on its side, but there was no water in my lungs that I recall coughing up. There appeared to be nothing wrong with me, other than disconnect. I recall I did not speak till the next day. And I remember just fighting, not going into my body. Like, I'm here, I'm looking at it. You can't make me get all the way in it. I don't want to go. It was kind of this like a child, indignant. You can't make me do anything. I didn't have the understanding I do now then. And I'm so thankful I was guided back to my body. But there was that disconnect for what felt like a year. Like I just couldn't connect to my human self in the sense of the expansion I had been in, knowing what everything was and being part of all that is or was ever created, and then trying to take that whole consciousness and that understanding in that light that was my being and putting it back into a physical body was almost as traumatic as I call the original PTSD of being a physical manifestation. But the next day I did speak, and I spoke to my brother. I said, "What made you think you could swim or run to me like that to save me?" And the look on his face and the way his jaw kind of dropped, and he turned a little white. He's like, "How did you know that?" And I'm like, "I died. I told my mother I died. I knew I had died, and I told him my experience. And thankfully, my family had gifts and other experiences. Even though I was raised Catholic, they knew there was more than was being taught. And so thankfully I had that support. My mother always supported me, was my in-between, because after this experience, it expanded me. I had all the clair abilities and precognitive dreams and knowings and intuitive understandings. My mother called me a very old soul. And being so young, I didn't know how to approach people if I knew things. So she would always find a way to tell them. As I got older, she did say, that's from Lorelei, she sees things or knows things. And people began to trust that. I recall my sister not taking a flight because I had seen it wasn't anything for the flight, but just where it would lead to and the circumstances, and that was such a beautiful validation, I guess you would say, that, they knew I was only guided from love and accepted me for those gifts that I came with. So I was very lucky to have that where many struggle. But it was still difficult because I could also tell when people were about to leave. I could see this soul separation within them, usually about 2 weeks before they were going to leave. That energy was already disconnecting. They'd almost look like wax dummies, like kind of melty and shiny, their physical bodies to me. As they connected with that light, I understand it now. They were connecting with source, with that light. They kind of looked lofty. But I asked Spirit not to see that because as a small child, that was very disturbing to me. And I didn't have an understanding, so I felt responsible, especially if I gave them some sort of warning intuitively and they didn't heed it or wouldn't. I had a relative that I said, "Get to the doctor. You need to be evaluated." And the doctor evaluated them, but sent them home, and they died 2 weeks later of an aneurysm. And that was very hard for me. It was a dear aunt, and I took it on a lot. I caused a lot of dis-ease energetically from taking responsibility for this story that's playing out of Lorelei. So I struggled a lot starting at like 15 with autoimmune, and I was diagnosed with so many things and so much issues because I was taking on too much. During one of my experiences, one of the things my family thought was a ghost encounter was me visiting my siblings, because I was born 5 years after the youngest and 12 years after the oldest. So I knew I wouldn't get to play with my sisters, because they were 10 and 12 by the time I was born. So I played with their doll things. There was this big heart. My mom always talked about, like, the ghost made a heart out of their doll clothes. Well, from something I was given, like, that was me, and I was just trying to connect with them. I have like a psychic mediumship, and the clair abilities and various other things. But as far as like helping others or I have a healing practice, it's always whatever the highest good is for someone. And that's what I ask for. Spirit, I don't tell spirit what to do. It's always like, so I have these various abilities, but they only flow for me to like, I was shown